Hi everyone, I'm Glenn from The Growth Code, and today I'll be talking about principles that have helped me take more responsibility for my communication. With these, I have learned to communicate in a more loving, friendly, assertive manner. Don't forget, these are based on my vision and experiences. I'll be releasing 4 videos on how you can take more action to learn to communicate in a more loving, friendly, assertive manner. The first one will commence after this small introduction, which is how to communicate with yourself. Then you also have how to communicate with your friends, partner/spouse, and at the end, how to communicate with your family. In these videos, I will give 2 examples. One of my past communication habits, and the other one on how I now do it differently. Afterwards, I'll tell you what worked for me, give some tips, and I'll end the video with a few exercises you can try out for yourself and experience the effects of them. When I was younger, and actually up until the age of 26, I was just suppressing. I was convinced I was the most happiest person around, and I made sure everyone knew this, unknowing how unhappy I actually was. I was suppressing my feelings and emotions and being happy by buying new things. It was actually the idea of buying something that made me happy, because whenever I would receive my purchases, it made me happy for 1 or 2 days, and then I would just look for the next best thing to buy in order to feel happy. So avoiding what I felt and covering it up with superficial purchases brings me to my first example, and perhaps even my most profound moment while being in therapy. To give you a concrete insight into my buying habits, how they used to be. At some point I bought a Nintendo Switch, even though I didn't have the financial means to do so. My best friend at that time knew how bad my finances were, and she was helping me so I could improve in this regard. However, I decided to lie to her because I didn't want to disappoint her. So I told her my mom bought the Switch for me. To give you a concrete insight into my buying habits, how they used to be. At some point I bought a Nintendo Switch, even though I didn't have the financial means to do so. My best friend at that time knew how bad my finances were, and she was helping me so I could improve in this regard. However, I decided to lie to her because I didn't want to disappoint her. So I told her my mom bought the Switch for me. A couple of days after having lied to my best friend, I was having a conversation with my personal counselor from the place where I was staying to get professional help. And I went on how bad I felt about having lied to my best friend, and how I have to make sure she would never find out. And then at some point, because I was lost in my words, I was just rambling on. She stopped me and asked me, "But Glenn, why don't you just tell her the truth?" And I was shocked. I was sitting there and I was shocked because her asking me that question made it actually an option again in my head. Because before that, I was doing everything in my power to remember all my lies and make sure no one would find out. She wouldn't find out. But immediately I knew that was what I wanted to do, what I needed to do. So I asked her to wait a few minutes. I left the room and I called up my best friend and asked her if she could come over that night. It was a Friday. She said she could, so she came over that night. But I went back in the room and I told her what I just did. And she was happy, she was very supportive, it was so comforting. That night my friend came over and I told her the truth. While I was crying, which was awkward, because it was the first time I actually cried in front of her, I told her that I lied about the Nintendo Switch. And so I continued to explain to her why I lied and why I lied about so many other things, right? Because I used to lie all the time. The reason for that was that I didn't want to disappoint her, and I was scared that if I would tell her the truth and come clear and say I lied to you, she would leave me and we wouldn't be friends anymore. And I was also convinced that if I would say no to something she would ask me, she would like me less. At the end of her visit, she told me she needed some time away from me to process everything I just said. And after she was gone, I remember sitting on the couch. And it was weird because I wasn't really sad anymore. I actually felt guilty about not being as sad as I thought I should be. So I started asking myself questions. What is it that I'm feeling as well? And I discovered I was also proud of myself, which I found very weird because I could still lose her as a friend. So I continued to ask myself more questions. Why am I feeling proud? And then I discovered that I was actually proud of myself because for the very first time in a long time, I was being true to myself. Because I'm not a liar. It's not who I am nor who I want to be. And then I was also proud by the fact that for the first time in a very long time, I treated my friend the way I feel like she deserves to be treated. Ever since, I've become very curious and excited about discovering who I am. And it started with that communication, asking myself those difficult questions and not being satisfied with saying, I don't know. A matter of fact is that I don't believe people when they say that they don't know something about themselves. My friends usually don't like it when I tell them that, because that means that when we're in conversation, they can't just say, I don't know. Well, they can, but they know I wouldn't be satisfied with that. And then usually when they push through and they think a little bit deeper, they discover something new about themselves, which afterwards they are very grateful for. For some background information on my journey with therapy, I received what is called dialectical behavior therapy. A big part of this was getting used to taking some time for myself and my emotions. So I used to work with like an emotional diary, journal, and ever since I still often take the time to think about experiences and asking myself those questions. And this will be the very first exercise and tip. My school is the very first thing I committed to after getting professional help. It's also been the longest period I've been committing to something. So on a lot of days I was just feeling overwhelmed. I didn't want to go and I was thinking of calling in sick just for the sake of not going. But instead of that, I began to coach myself. So on some days I would call up a friend and talk about it. On other days I would listen to motivational speakers or music on YouTube. And whilst standing in front of the mirror, I would, talk to myself. I would explain to myself what I was feeling, why I was feeling it, and what I would accomplish if I decide to go instead of calling in sick. So looking at the bigger picture and my goals. Also, whenever I decided I would go, so just by deciding, it was already getting better. And I realized on most days that I went, it was always better than I was actually feeling about it. And at the end of my internship, I still had fears and doubts. But the amazing thing was that it actually took me less than 5 minutes to coach myself through those moments. And on some days it actually left me feeling empowered. This brings me to my second tip and exercise. Start learning to coach yourself. Don't leave the house when feeling negative. By leaving the house in a negative state, everything you say, feel and hear will be experienced negative. And on most days while I was riding my bike to the internship, I was still listening to audiobooks to further calm myself, find peace that all will be okay, or to empower myself some more. And that way, you can change your negative beliefs instead of confirming them. And perhaps you can even change them. Because you can change them if you put in the work. And that doesn't mean you are not allowed to have a bad day. It just means that on most bad days, you take that responsibility to try to turn it around. We have reached the end of the video. So I'll recap the 2 exercises. The first one is to start communicating with yourself. Every day, sit down without distractions and start talking to yourself. Begin to ask those questions. You'll get to know yourself much better. If this is too difficult to start, just begin simple. Ask yourself, why am I excited for today? Why am I looking forward to tomorrow? Or why am I not feeling it? Why am I feeling so sad or in a bad mood today? I really try to pinpoint it, because you will know when you have found the answer. And when you do, just by knowing about it, understanding it, it will already make it better. The second tip is start coaching yourself. Begin with talking to yourself. Use statements, but only statements you can believe. Believing here is a key factor. So let's say it's a Sunday or a Monday and you're already stressed out because you have to go to work. A job you might not like, to people / a boss you might not like. So put on some music that makes you happy. Stop talking to yourself, use statements, and see if you can change your state. Because if you learn this skill, if you learn to coach yourself, your days will be full of amazing things. Why? Because you've taken the responsibility to make it so. It's also a great way to boost your confidence. And changing your state is something I learned from Tony Robbins. And while he loves to jump on his little trampoline and clap his hands, I just love to talk and coach myself. But I do think he's an amazing guy. I'm Glenn from the Growth Code. Thanks for watching, and let's work together to get you closer to a life that you want to lead. Take care.